The Scientists in Action. Our first moderator is Syed Omar Ahmed. Syed Omar Ahmed received a BSc in Computer Engineering from Lahore University of Management Science, Pakistan in 2005. In 2007, he received a Master's in Electrical Engineering from West Virginia University. This was followed by a PhD in Electrical Engineering with a focus on adaptive wireless networks from Virginia Tech in 2014. Currently, he is working with Savari Networks on connected vehicles in the Metro Detroit area. He is a member of the Detroit Jamaat. We also have Dr. Hamid Mirza, who is a professor at York University in Canada and the president and chief scientific officer at the AS Chemical Laboratories, Incorporated. He received an MS degree in chemistry from Lakehead University in 1988. In 1993, he completed his PhD in chemistry at the University of Western Ontario, after which he joined McGill University as a postdoctoral research fellow. Dr. Mirza's research focuses on the synthesis of light harvesting devices and the development of novel pharmaceutical products. To date, Dr. Mirza has published over 45 scientific papers and delivered over 50 presentations at various conferences worldwide. He serves as a National Secretary Talim, or Education, for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Canada. He is also serving as the president of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Scientists Association in the past. He has also served as president of Peace Village East Chapter and vice president for Majlis Ansarullah Canada.
Assalamu alaikum. Our first speaker for this session is going to be Dr. Ijaz Ahmed. Dr. Ijaz Ahmed is currently a postdoctoral research fellow at Worcester Polytechnic Institute and holds an adjunct faculty position at the same university. It's the Worcester State University. He was awarded his PhD in 2015 in the area of organic chemistry at Syracuse University. He worked briefly at GlaxoSmithKline as a PhD intern in the area of cancer epigenetics. His interest is in synthetic organic chemistry as well as the application of organometallic complexes. Dr. Ahmed's current research focuses on the efficient separation of rare earth metals. He received the MK Majlis Khudam al-Ahmadiyya Talent Award in 2014 for his publication on the rapid synthesis of bienol derivatives. On a Jamaat level, he currently serves as the General Secretary for the Association of Ahmadi Muslim Scientists and the Regional Nazim Atfal for the Northeast region. He is also blessed with the opportunity to be part of the National Tabligh follow-up team. He will be speaking on the topic of developing a sustainable process for recycling rare earth elements. Dr. Ijaz, please go.
Jazakallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Jazakallah for the invitation to speak at this symposium. So I'm going to be discussing my research during my postdoctoral work, which has been dealing with recycling rare earth elements. So rare earth elements actually aren't that rare. They are abundant in the Earth's crust. The reason they've been given the term rare is because back in the 50s and 60s, when they were trying to isolate these elements, they had a very difficult challenge. And the reason is that these elements are very similar in the chemical and physical properties. So when they're mined from the ground, they're all clumped up together. And it has to undergo very series of chemical processes to separate out the individual elements. So that's why they were given the term rare, is due to the difficulty in separating each of these elements. And we just heard an amazing presentation in the last session about going green energy, and these verses were presented. And I'm not gonna go over these verses yet, but I want you to think about these verses from Surah Al-Rahman, that you may not transgress the measure, so weigh all things in justice and fall not short on the measure. And I'll get back to this in a little bit. So what are rare earth elements for? Basically, you have a bunch of rare earth elements in your pocket right now. So your cell phones contain a lot of rare earth elements. You have europium, which gives the different colors on the screen, neodymium and dysprosium for the hard drives and other computer devices. But they're also very essential for solar panels and wind turbines. So you can see some sort of relationship between my research and the research by Dr. Hamid Nassim, in that these solar panels, these wind turbines, a lot of these new technologies that are surfacing, we're utilizing a lot of these rare earth elements. So just to identify those rare earth elements, there's about 17. They are the lanthanide series, which is that orange row on the bottom, and it also includes scandium and yttrium. And they've been classified, you can classify between more abundant and less abundant, and I'll get a little bit into that. So for here in the United States, we're mining for rare earth elements outside of California. And as you see on the left-hand side, cerium and lanthanum are the elements that we mine the most, but there's a lot of other elements that we'd like to use. And what we presently use in the USA are the elements that we're not mining here in the USA. We're importing them from other countries, and namely China. China is a country that is currently producing 100% of the rare earth elements. The company that was mining outside of California filed for bankruptcy last year. So there's a lot of challenge and difficulty in mining for these, and all of the elements are coming from China. And now that China is realizing this, they're limiting the export of these valuable resources. So going back to this verse, where Allah Ta'ala is asking us to not transgress the measures and weigh all things in justice, we're starting to see that there's this level of injustice going on, that China has all these valuable resources that Allah Ta'ala has given us for these new technologies, and they're not being distributed to all the other countries. So these countries that we have right now, and we're using these rare earth elements for electric cars and solar panels and wind turbines and other things, we're not recycling them. These are being thrown out either into a landfill and just taken away, and nobody's actually recycling out the individual elements. Individual parts are recycled, but the elements are not. And this is actually becoming a problem. So this is where the research in our lab at the Worcester Polytechnic Institute has gone into trying to develop a supply chain to improve sustainability of these valuable resources. So if you can imagine that we start off with these rare earth ores, they are mined, and they come up as a mixture because of their similar chemical and physical properties. That would have to undergo some sort of a separation, and then we get those individual elements that can be used in materials. And that last step that's highlighted here is the recycling part, all right? Can we take these materials, recycle out the rare earth elements, and then reintroduce it into this whole process? And this work was done recently in the lab, and it was highlighted in BBC's Horizon.
Is really to take off. We're going to have to recycle and reuse a lot more. Take this old, very heavy electric motor, for instance. Well, it's basically done with, but it's still packed with valuable metals. We've just got to get at them. And that's what they're doing here in Massachusetts in the USA. It's a new area of science and technology called urban mining.
Those vital elements are increasingly needed in electric cars, mobile phones, and even medical imaging devices because they're good at conducting electricity. They are the 17 rare earth elements or metals. Our need for them is escalating, yet our ability to source them is limited. That's because they're not found in large deposits globally, so reusing them will be essential in the future. At the Worcester Polytechnic Institute...
And just pour it in. There you go. All right.
Okay.
This secondary agent makes the rare earth elements deposit out as a solid from the solution.
And is that what we end up with?
That is what it is.
And those are the rare earths we actually want?
That is.
You could sell this product?
It's a rare earth that we could sell.
Amazing.
With this process, they can recover more than 80% of the rare earth metals. A provisional patent has now been filed, and if scaled up, these minerals could be on track to enter the circular economy.
So this work was completed, and we took electric motors from electric vehicle, a Chevy Volt, and recycled out the rare earth elements from that electric motor. But we're still ending up with a mixture of these elements, namely neodymium, dysprosium, and praseodymium. And with this mixture, we still have to undergo this separation phase. So this is where I'm going to go into my research of separating these rare earth elements. And as I mentioned before, there's a big challenge, and that is that they have very similar size, the charge, they have very similar charge, they have very similar oxidation state, and other chemical and physical properties. So you can't exploit any of those properties to separate these elements out. But I do have, and it's kind of small here, is the ionic radii of these elements listed. And the difference between the ionic radii is about 0.2 to 0.3 angstroms going across the entire series of the lanthanides. And so what you see is that we have atoms that are larger towards the left-hand side of the periodic table, and then atoms that become smaller as you go towards the right. And this is the one property that we've identified as being the property to try and go through for the separation. And what we are looking at is solvent-solvent extraction. So kind of imagine, the game where you have a little crane and you're going and trying to grab a different puppet or different animal, stuffed animal from the machine. My work is designing that claw that goes to grab the individual specific element from this pool of elements. So I'm using a mixture of computational work along with the experimental work and designing these different compounds. And I'm synthesizing the compounds. So I have to cut it short, but I just wanted to give that introduction into my research as to what we're doing. And going back to that verse, that it's important for us to, we see this injustice, but we have these elements, let's try and do with what we've got and recycle and reuse these in the future. So I want to thank everyone, thank the AMS USA for inviting me and my lab and everyone. Jazakallah, assalamu alaikum.
Should I go ahead just myself? Because
You were already
okay.
introduced.
Assalamu alaikum. I've been already introduced, so I'll take my time now. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ahmadi, and I am part of the Metro Detroit Jamaat. As you would know, Detroit is famous for automotive industry, and some of my work is in connected vehicles technology. The first thing that people think of connected vehicles is it's related with self-driving cars. I just got bonus minute, Selbhai. So the idea behind technology is that it's evolving. 30 years ago, when people were thinking of what the future cars would look like, many of them would probably think of flying cars. We are not there yet, but we do have a dose of artificial intelligence and wireless networking that is increasingly becoming part of the vehicles technology in this day and age. The automotive industry started moving towards vehicular communications a long time back in 2002, and now the idea is to connect vehicles through wireless networks, but also to connect them to infrastructure, roadside equipment, and also to have vehicle-to-pedestrian environments where your cars could, let's say, warn pedestrians that there is a potential for crash, and they need to, let's say, be warned for that. One term that we use in our field is dedicated short-range communications, DSRC. That is basically the word for connected vehicles technology. So whenever you hear the word DSRC, it is really for connected vehicles. The idea behind this is that vehicles would transmit and receive information about their positions, for example. And eventually, it will be hopefully absorbed into the autonomous self-driving cars, which are mostly relying on radars and cameras to navigate as they move forward. So there's a slight difference between the two, but the idea is that eventually they will be merged together. One of the limitations of autonomous sensors that most self-driving cars have is that radars or cameras are basically line-of-sight devices in the sense that if you do not see an obstruction, you cannot stop it. An example is in this particular picture that I'm showing here. If you look at the black car, if you can look at the button, and never mind. You can just look at the black car at the bottom right. It can't see vehicles that are in front, and so its cameras would not be able to inform it of, for example, for this car, it can observe, its cameras may be able to observe this white car ahead, but not the black car, and definitely neither the radar or the camera would be able to do that. But the idea is that the DSRC, connected vehicles technology, would allow it to communicate with other vehicles within 300 meters despite obstructions. And what is DSRC? It's basically a modified form of Wi-Fi. And the system would allow it to track and detect threats and warn drivers, if crashes are imminent. Now, there are 200 to 300 million vehicles on the roads in this day and age. It's not possible for all of them to be retrofitted with self-driving technology. So in the meantime, you need to have measures and steps that would allow that transition. And DSRC is, let's say, a relatively low-cost solution that allows vehicles to be connected by installing that equipment. How does it work? It's basically using two technologies. One is a modified form of wireless, Wi-Fi's. Everyone is familiar with that. Wi-Fi's typically operate at the 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth. When you buy your Wi-Fi box from the market, you often see that 2.4 gigahertz imprinted on top of the boxes. The difference is that the DSRC is now relying on the 5.9 gigahertz. And there are some differences in how it's using its method, because you need to have reliability. You don't want your connection to be lost. And so there are some modifications that have been made to Wi-Fi as part of DSRC. So DSRC is just another name for, if I can make a simplification, another name for Wi-Fi. The idea is that each vehicle would broadcast through its own DSRC Wi-Fi, if I can again use that term, 10 times a second typically, and therefore receive messages from as many vehicles are there in the environment. And each message that it broadcasts or receives basically contains the GPS position, heading, and speed, besides other critical information from those in the vicinity. And that real-time tracking would allow it to give it, warning ahead of time if a crash is imminent, or if there is a possibility for, close call. As an example, if you have a forward warning, majority of the accidents happen in this scenario where almost 70% of the crashes happen because the warning was not generated. In this example, the advantage over self-driving cars might be that this vehicle, if it's moving fast, this is a slow-moving bus, and this is a hard-braking red car, this warning would allow this to stop ahead of time. Typically, if this bus would be able to stop because of physics and dynamics, because it's moving relatively slower, but this car might not be able to get the warning in sufficient time. And so unlike radar or camera, that collision warning could come directly over the air to this vehicle, and that warning generation would allow it to avoid hitting this bus in front. Another scenario, which is sort of, you may want to call the killer application, is the intersection, where your cameras and radars would not be able to detect vehicles that are coming in from an angle. And if you have a fast-moving car that's moving into your lane and you're not aware of that, that warning would again be generated into your system, and it would allow you to sort of know that you need to slow down. Likewise, for this fast-moving car also, there might be a warning if it's equipped with that particular software version. A third example is the blindside warning. Let's say this white car wants to move into its right lane, and you have a fast-moving bus that's trying to come into that path. Now, low-cost radars and cameras would only be able to, let's say, provide, let's say, a warning in this region, not for a vehicle that's moving fast from that particular angle. And again, this is just because of the fact that radars are expensive and cameras may not be available in every car on the side. So again, over-the-air communication would allow them to be aware of potential threats. Okay, now that obviously comes with plenty of challenges. Challenges include that your GPS has to be accurate enough. And now GPS equipment is accurate enough to give you lane-level accuracy. But obviously that is compromised when you have tunnels, when you have high-rise buildings. And obviously, in this environment, when you have, let's say, an urban canyon, your car is driving through that, you don't have enough visibility, open sky, and you would not be able to get enough messages from satellite. So your GPS would be compromised. Your actual position might show up over the air like 10, 20 meters above, further down the road. So that's a major challenge. And the way to resolve that is to come up with, correcting roadside equipment that would, in that particular environment, inform you of the corrections that you need to make about your position. Another issue is congestion. It's, as many of you may have experienced, as more and more people start using Wi-Fi, there's a congestion, your performance degrades. Same problem. If you have hundreds of vehicles, there's congestion and there's a breakdown of performance. So scalability is an issue. Third issue is obviously you have malicious users, hackers, which might try to transmit over the channel, might create a problem, and spoof position. So for example, a vehicle might be at this point, but it's transmitting deliberately at another point. It might cause the warning to be generated unnecessarily, or it may cause stoppage of the necessary warnings. Again, just to summarize, what's happening is that most car manufacturers and the US DOT, Department of Transportation, are moving towards trying to deploy this. Hopefully in the next year or so, the first preliminary systems would be out. Prototypes have already been developed, but right now, testing and evaluation is being conducted to make sure that we have equipment that's working. But we have many new technologies that may be coming up, including the notion of having smart cities, which are providing you live GPS corrections, dynamic traffic light information that's coming in over the air, and proximity warnings to pedestrians if there's a car that's running amok. So that's pretty much the summary of the work that's being conducted in this DSRC, or Connected Vehicles Technology. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakumullah, Dr. Saab, it was an excellent presentation. I hope we'll be able to use this technology in our lifetime. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the Holy Quran, Allah Ta'ala mentioned that at the time when the promised Messiah will advent, earth will spit out its treasures. And in fact, this is something which we have realized that from the time of the advent of the promised Messiah, Islam, discoveries, inventions, and all new scientific advancement has occurred. Today, I will briefly highlight a portion of this area, which is in the science of in the chemical sciences, which is the concept of the chirality. Before I introduce this subject, I want to discuss how it was discovered and what is the chirality meant to us. Louis Pasteur, in around mid-19th century, he was working in his lab, and he discovered that the tartaric acid salts, which he was working, they have two different type of crystals. He isolated them under the microscope, ran in the polarimeter, and then he discovered that one of the crystal turned light on one direction, the other turned in the other direction. That was the time when he discovered different properties, and he termed this as a chiral substance. So chiral substances basically, the concept of the chirality come, which is referred to as handedness. As you can see our hand, they look exactly same. If I have a mirror over here, so they will be looking a mirror image. Left hand has a mirror image of the right hand. However, if I try to superimpose, they don't. So this is the concept which I want to discuss. These those tartaric acid molecules, which have been shown here, D and the L, they look exactly same, but when you put them in the polarimeter, then they turn light on a different direction. The substance which is called chiral we refer in the chemistry for a carbon which has 4 different groups attached to it. So as you can see, the central carbon in these molecules, they have 4 different groups attached to it, and that actually create the chirality in these molecules. Now, why these compounds are important? The properties of these compounds, although they look identical, but their properties, they differ. Chemically, they have same chemical composition. The melting point, boiling point, they are very similar. However, their action in the body is different. So these chiral substances, for instance, when you look at the vitamin E, it has 2 different optical isomers. One is useful, the other is not. Similarly, when we look some other examples, for instance, EMB, which is used for the tuberculosis. So one of the enantiomer, it is an active drug for tuberculosis, while the other cause blindness. Olive, another one, which is used for the arthritis pain. The other enantiomer does not help at all. It is not even analgesics. There are a number of examples which we can go through for all different diseases where these enantiomers, one will work, the other does not. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih the Fourth, Rahimahullah Ta'ala, he touched this subject in the book Revelation, Rationality, Knowledge and Truth, where he has mentioned that how this subject has been described in the Holy Quran. So today I will just go over a few verses of the Holy Quran which mention about this. For instance, this verse in chapter 70, verse 38, Allah Ta'ala says that from the right hand and from the left hand in different parties. So right and left, the concept which I want to highlight here. Then the verse in chapter 39, 68, again, Allah Ta'ala mentioned about the heavens that he will roll up in his right hand. Again, in chapter 20, verse 18, Allah Ta'ala says that what is that in thy right hand when addressing to the Moses. And interestingly, Allah Ta'ala in the other chapters in the Holy Quran mentioned this in a very different tone. For instance, in chapter 56, verse 9, Allah Ta'ala says that those on the right hand, how lucky are those? Then he said, those who are on the left hand, how unlucky are those? So this is also discussed in terms of the goodness and the badness of 2 parties. And in the same way, when you look at the micro level, then perhaps the chemistry behind these. Not only this, Holy Quran also mentioned, interestingly, the technique which is used to discuss the right hand and the left hand, which I earlier touched briefly, the polarimeter. I'll quote one verse which is very interesting in this regard, which is mentioned in Surah Al-Nahl, verse 49. And the shadows of everything which Allah has created shift from the right and from the left, which is turning right and left in the polarimeter. The concept of the polarimeter is mentioned in 57, chapter 12, 13. Light proceed before them and on the right, and then in the following verse Allah says that, and a wall will be placed between them, and a door, its interior contain mercy. Now, if you look at the polarimeter itself, we place a solution of these substances, we pass the plain polarized light, and then on the other end, when we look into it, it turns right and left. And this device itself is mercy to mankind because that has actually helped a lot in developing and understanding the mechanistics of those substances which we ingest in our drugs. So this is the picture of the polarimeter. Now I will just quickly go over the last, actually okay, this part, where I'm showing you why these substances are important. When you look at the binding of our drugs to human body, then these are the binding sites in the enzymes or proteins, and the drugs which have been shown here, chiral drugs, you can see that when they come right on that specific sites, then the binding occurs and the drug interaction occurs with the body. Now, if we rotate, if we turn just one turn, then they are not going to be binding with the substrate. So for drugs to be active in our body, they need to be completely on those specific sites in order to perform and in order to give the effects which we look into it. Just I think last 1 second. Now, over the last 20 years, there's a lot of research started in this direction where they're trying to identify those different molecules which are acting in these as in optical isomers. My research has started where we're looking those molecules and trying to map out those which are active and those which comes on rotating on the right side or the left side, and then to understand in the light of the Holy Quran how we can utilize this knowledge in order to further develop medicines and to guide people in the industry and in the research and the academia where they can utilize this knowledge to create more useful drugs. Jazakumullah.
Our next speaker is Dr. Nayyar Ahmed Khokhar. Dr. Nayyar Ahmed Khokhar will be speaking on the topic of solving the problem of drug-induced pancreatitis due to cancer drug asparaginase, if that is how I were to pronounce it. Dr. Nayyar is currently a postdoctoral research fellow in the Hussain Lab at the Children's Hospital Pittsburgh at the University of Pittsburgh. He was awarded a PhD in 2015 in the area of allergy and immunology at Deakin University, Australia. His interest is in biochemical pathways pertaining to translational system biology. His current research focus is on drug-induced acute pancreatitis. Some of his achievements include 3 journal articles and 2 book chapters published to date. He's also a recipient of the 2013 Taaleem Gold Medal Award from Huzoor. And on a Jamaat level, he serves as the finance team leader and as the General Secretary, Principal Tahir Academy and Majlis Khudam al-Ahmadiyya Nazim Tabligh for Pittsburgh chapter. He is also a member of the Muslim Writers Guild of America. Dr. Nayyar Ahmed, if you can kindly come.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Jazakallah for that introduction. And it is an honor and a blessing to be part of this symposium today. To begin with, the topic of my presentation today is solving the problem of drug-induced pancreatitis due to the cancer drug asparaginase. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the thirst for science that I have. Islam is a religion that promotes education. In fact, the first word that was revealed upon the founder of Islam was read, enlightening the distinction between the learned and the ignorant. Evidently, as Dr. Abdul Salam has stated, that there are in excess of 700 verses of the Holy Quran that exhort Muslims to reflect on nature and Allah's creation, or in other words, do scientific research. It is worthy to note that Muslim scientists in the past have made significant contributions in the field of physical sciences and mathematics. This period was known as the Islamic Golden Age, where the Islamic world was the epicenter of major scientific discoveries that have had a significant impact on modern sciences. Names like Ibn Sina, Al-Khwarizmi, and Ibn Haytham are revered to this day in the modern world for their significant contributions in the field of biology, physics, chemistry, and mathematics. This is a legacy that we Ahmadi Muslims must never forget. Lastly, and most importantly, Khalifatul Masih has implored youth to undertake research and set the minimum target of a Nobel Prize. So to begin with my talk today, I'm going to focus on acute pancreatitis. What is acute pancreatitis? It is the inflammation of the pancreas. It has a high morbidity and substantial mortality associated with this disease. There are over 275,000 hospitalizations that take place in the US alone. Incidence of this is about 30 to 45 cases per 100,000 people per year. Under the umbrella of drug-induced pancreatitis, my focus is on the drug asparaginase, which is used as a chemotherapeutic for certain cancers such as acute lymphoblastic leukemia, also known as ALL. Even non-essential, ALL is the most common cancer in children. It has an incidence of 3.5 per 100,000 children. It is associated with an unacceptably high frequency of pancreatitis, which ranges between 6.7% to 18% of patients. Now, how does asparaginase, the drug, the chemotherapeutic drug, cause pancreatitis? That is where our lab comes in. So the way asparaginase works is by depriving cancer cells of asparagine, which is a non-essential amino acid, which then becomes facultatively or conditionally essential. Leukemic cells have low levels of asparagine synthetase, which is an enzyme that generates asparagine from aspartate. Hence, they are unable to replace the lost asparagine due to asparaginase, resulting into apoptosis or pancreatitis. However, with every medication, there are side effects, and one of the side effects of asparaginase is pancreatitis. So a little cartoon that shows on the right side of the screen, you can see that an increase in asparaginase will cause a depletion of asparagine, and that is something that results into the death of cancer cells. However, in acinar cells, which are pancreatic cells, it has a different effect. So pancreatic acinar cells make up about 90% of the pancreas. Acinar cells are protein-making factories and have the highest rate of protein generation amongst any cells of the body. Hence, it requires high amounts of amino acids and nutrients to keep up enzyme production. However, any change in the balance of this amino acid ratio can result into stress on these cells, which may lead to pancreatitis. It is the case of asparagine. In this case, the asparaginase drug is causing the depletion of the amino acid asparagine. So, going into the hypotheses of my project, the first hypothesis that we put forward is a defective counter-response from the drug asparagine synthetase, which leads to a reduced asparagine to aspartate ratio. Our second hypothesis is an inability to mount a proper unfolded protein response, which leads to accumulation of upstream UPR markers. Now, these UPR markers are ER stress markers, and that includes BIP and many other markers that we are trying to study. Our third hypothesis is glutamine deprivation. Now, very interestingly, asparaginase and asparagine synthetase both happen to be glutaminases, or enzymes that actually break down glutamine. So we're also trying to study whether depletion or deprivation of glutamine leads to pancreatitis, and a change in glutamine to glutamate ratio may be responsible for that. The aims of my project are to show the expression of asparagine synthetase in different organs in a mouse model. The green tick on the right-hand side actually shows the step that we have already completed. And we have shown with the Western blot and qPCR that ASNS is predominantly expressed in the pancreas. And also, we have to identify and characterize pathways and biomarkers that are responsible for asparagine synthetase gene expression or activity which is involved in asparaginase pancreatitis. And so we're actually working on this step, and that is indicated by the yellow tick mark. Our second aim is to identify and characterize pathways and biomarkers that are involved in the endoplasmic reticulum stress, or ER stress. And that is basically caused by the accumulation of the different ER stress markers such as BIP or many others. We have to develop inhibitory and antagonistic therapeutics to the above biomarkers that regulate expression of asparagine synthetase and UPR response. Our aim 3 is to examine whether asparaginase pancreatitis results from pancreatic glutamine deprivation. And lastly, we have to develop safer alternative methods of delivering asparaginase to patients that suffer from asparaginase-associated pancreatitis in combination with different drugs. So just to summarize, asparaginase pancreatitis is a major problem for patients with leukemia. And our hypotheses are threefold. We're looking at defective pancreatic asparagine synthetase, the UPR response, which is a result of the asparaginase drug, and also glutamine deprivation, or a combination of both. And thirdly, we are currently engaged in a two-pronged approach that utilizes animal models and clinical samples. So we're actually working with mice models at the moment, and we're inducing pancreatitis in the mouse model, and that will actually help us understand what exactly is happening at the cellular level. Our goal is to develop a diagnostic tool that will help us identify patients at high risk for asparaginase, and this will actually help us have a broader understanding of metabolic pathways and ER stress and pancreatitis transduction. Jazakallah, and we request prayers for this project. And at the end, I have my acknowledgements, which is the Hussein Lab and members of the Ahmadi Association of Muslim Scientists. Jazakumullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah. Our next speaker is Dr. Altaf Qadir, who is a member of the European Science Education Research Association. He has served as the adjunct professor and site coordinator at York University. He is currently working as a researcher at the Department of Science Education, Faculty of Educational Sciences, Granada University, Spain. He has worked as an educator for a long period in various parts of the world, including his long work in Canada. He's also a member of the Partnership Advisory Committee at OISE, University of Toronto. He has a variety of scholarly interests, including his research in lexicography, Urdu creative writing, pioneering research journals for children, designing and testing research tools and media-related work, including his work in the early days of Radio Ahmadiyya Canada and MTA. Dr. Altaf Qadir has recently written a book with some innovative approaches about cognitive net inspiring creativity and innovation. He has presented at various conferences and has delivered lectures on a variety of topics, and is a member of the Review of Religions Research Canada, and he is a recipient of the Alme Anami Atfal from Hazrat Khalifatul Masih in 1978. So I would request Dr. Altaf Qadir to kindly come forward and deliver his talk on education networks. Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون. And these are the similitudes that we set forth for mankind that they may reflect. 59:22. Our minds are always predicting, thinking, what will happen next? So right now, what you are thinking, our mind is traveling through the galaxies of frames of mind, connecting them, breaking them, reinventing them, redefining them, and as a result, we keep making different conclusions in our lifetime. I'm trying to keep my speech and the presentation simple so everyone can understand, and keeping away scientific terminology as much as I can. So as you will see, the research says that the examples inspire us, and as a result, we can make new connections and we can lead to new insights. And this is how even many new inventions have happened in the human history and in the science education. Promised Messiah alayhi salam has said in Ayyam as-Sulh, our contemplation, our thinking, and our ways of searching for the unseen, all these matters are part of supplication. This is the gist of what he said. And in order to see the all detail, I encourage that we see Ayyam as-Sulh, page 2 and 3. In his own words, Hazur says, Hamara sochna, hamara fikr karna, aur hamara talabe amare makhfi ke liye khayal daudana, ye sab amur dua hi mein dakhil hain. So that gives dua, supplication, a new dimension in education, in research, in invention, in testing hypotheses, in exploring anything new. It is believed that the average person has as many as 70,000 unique thoughts in a single day. So now you can ask yourself which one you are thinking right now, right? So we are going through a chain of thoughts all the time. Some of them we don't care about, some of them we connect very well, some of them are eureka moments for us, some of them are momentary brainwaves, we solve a problem. But if you look at Holy Quran, there is something very interesting about the sequence of the verses that normally people don't try to compare. If you look at the normal text that we have in the stories, in the books, or in the journals, you will see there's a certain pattern that we have to follow. But if you look at Holy Quran, you may not see the same sequence. You will see that things are coming in different orders. Sometime it will be talking about one thing, then it goes to another thing. It's not the sequence that is talking about wuzu and then namaz, and then it's talking about roza. It might be in a very different order which will appear to us. But Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Anhu, the reference is given, you can see more details, has explained that this is based on, by Allah who created us, on the feelings of our heart, qalbi kafiyat. And as a result, if we read them, Allah knows when you will be reading those verses, which kafiyat, which situation, which feeling you will be going through, and as a result, you can explore more, something which He has created for us. So enhancing the nets of ideas, nets of insights, spiritual nets, and comparing different things can give us various ways of making interdisciplinary comparisons. So I looked at the Urdu translation of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Rabi, Rahmahullah, and what I did, I looked at all the index pages which Hazur has mentioned about science, and I put them together. So as a result, you can see the nets of ideas appearing, and I have this in a photocopy form also. It's not official, I just translated to show you that what I'm thinking, and as a result, we can elaborate further in different sciences, and all sciences are now moving towards interdisciplinary thoughts. So this is something that we should consider for our research, for our inventions. And this ayat is very important in this context, which we are all familiar. And if you look at 5-volume commentary through Al-Islam on page 2542, there is something mentioned about, the verse is talking about the two bodies of water. And metaphorically, it's talking about physical world and the spiritual sciences and how these oceans can be combined. So this is something which will give us further enlightenment to move in this direction. So to make multiple nets, what they are talking that if you want to be Einstein, what you have to do. And you can see that successful invention depends on that how you make different type of connections. If you look at Einstein's invention, for example, connecting the ideas of clock, elevator, train, and light, how he came up with a wonderful theory, which is still inspiring all sciences. So collective approach is very important, and that is also something we look at now more carefully. Allah Ta'ala is also mentioned in chapter 67 that we have given you heart, we have given you eyes, we have given you ears, and that is also a way of collecting approach. Social neuroscience is something also very important to me because it was through the guidance of Azur that he mentioned that you talk about this to your scientist colleagues. And if you look at the spiritual sciences, they are also increasing. Even the Ivy League universities in the world are talking about spiritual psychology. And those are the programs where they are leading now. And mind, brain, and education is the growing paradigm. Even Harvard University has a master's program now about this. And I'm talking about connecting this through spiritual psychology and the insights of the Holy Quran with the spiritual pathways, which will develop many more new pathways to research further. Recently, a Nobel Prize was given in 2014 in medicine about discoveries of cells, which are like GPS in human brain. Now, I'm looking at a possible hypothesis. The world of internets in the brain and the world of the nets of ideas, subjects, and the books outside, even if you look at a small invention like cell phone, it's connected